So hello and welcome to this session on plastic pollution coming to you from Keep Scotland Beautiful. So this session is aimed at high schools and we're going to talk about all different aspects of plastic pollution. Now the way that this workshop works is it's a pre-recorded session and during the presentation at different points I might pop up this little symbol in the top right hand corner, this little pause symbol that you can see in purple here. Now that symbol is just to let you know that if you want to, you can pause the presentation. We're going to have a few questions, a couple of different activities going on. So if you want to pause the presentation and have a bit of discussion time, then please do so, or you can just carry on with the presentation. We also have a couple of videos that we're going to link to during the presentation. So again, you can pause and go and watch the videos as well. One of the videos we will be showing you part of, but you can go and watch the full video. We'll give you the link for that. So let's get started with this session on plastic pollution. So our planet has existed for 4.6 billion years, and in that time it's hosted all sorts of life for more than 3/4 of that time. But lately, unfortunately, we're seeing that beautiful natural landscapes just like this one are being turned into this, so basically being turned into rubbish dumps. And with human presence, particularly in the shape of waste, but particularly as well in the form of plastic waste, which is reaching all corners of our planet. So we're going to start having a little bit of a think about how did we get here? How did we get to the stage where we have so much plastic polluting our environment? And we're also going to think today about what can we possibly do about what can seem like an unsolvable problem. So we're going to start off with what are plastics? And so this is maybe a good point to pause the presentation. Again, I've got my little pause sign up there. If you want to have a think about in a discussion in class, what would you define as a plastic? So take a minute to have a think about that if you want to pause the presentation. So plastics are actually a wide range of synthetic or man-made or semi-synthetic materials that use what's called polymers. So polymers are just repetitions of molecules strung together like a chain. So there's a picture in the bottom there of an example of a polymer. So you can see there's a repeating pattern there. So we stick same molecules together in a long chain. And the name plastic comes from their capacity to be plasticity, which makes it possible for them to be molded or changed into different shapes or pressed into different objects. So they're really quite malleable in that sense. And there are lots of different types of polymers present in nature, but the polymers that we use to synthesize plastics are manufactured. So plastics do not exist in nature, they are manufactured by humans. So now I've got a question to pose to you. Where does the raw ingredient for modern plastic come from? So again, pause if you want to while you have a little think and answer the question in class. Where does it come from? So they've got you an A, B, C option. Is it A, plants, B, oil, or C, natural gas? Or is it more than one of those? So the answer, if you haven't paused the video, is actually all of them. So plastics can be derived from all of them. So they can come from natural plant-based products. They can, such as cellulose, but a lot of them come from fossil fuels like oil and natural gas. So about 99% of plastic is made from fossil fuels. So plastic comes from fossil fuels, but how is it made? So fossil fuels like oil and natural gas are extracted from where they are naturally found. They get mixed with other chemicals to form plastic pellets, little ones like these. And then they're pressed into their shape and shipped around the world. So that's the basics of how plastics are made. So the next question, if we think about this is where plastics come from and how they're made. When was plastic invented? So I'm going to give you a multiple choice again. Was it A, the 1800s, B, the 1900s, or C, the 1950s? When was plastic first invented? Again, have a pause and try and answer the question. So I'm going to give you the answer now. So the answer is A. So it was really quite early. So in 1962, Alexander Parks introduced the first ever man-made plastic that was called Parksine. So he was trying to develop an alternative for shellac for waterproofing. And it was marketed as a better substitute for ivory and horn as well. So that was when the first plastic was actually invented. The most crucial breakthrough came in the 1900s, though, when Leo Baekeland created Bakelite, which was the first synthetic mass-produced plastic. So if you want to learn a little bit more about the history of plastic, we have a link to this fantastic video. So if you want to do a bit more on the history of plastic, you can pause the video and watch this video and watch the YouTube video there. So there's a link there. You'll also have that link in your resources packs. The video isn't very long, it's only a few minutes long, so you can go and watch that just now, or you can watch it later. And part of your resources as well, we've got some questions to look into this topic in a bit more detail, so you could do those just now, or again, do them later if you want to look a bit more into the history of plastic and where it came from. So pause the video just now if you want to do that. So whether you've watched that video or if you're just carrying on, I want you to have a guess. You might know a bit more if you've watched the video, but whichever way, order from the earliest to the latest in terms of these inventions and milestones on the plastic history. So here we've got we've got polyethylene terephthalate, or PET bottles were patented. So this is the kind of origins of the plastic water bottles we see a lot. So when was this type of plastic bottle patented? First plastic toothbrush sold, nylon invented, and polystyrene mass manufactured for the first time. So can you put these in the order earliest to latest? Again, pause the video if you want to have a bit more time to think about this. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the answers. So this is the correct order. So polystyrene was invented before 1930, but mass manufacture started in the 1930s, which is pretty early, really, when you come to think of it. Nylon was invented in 1935, although it was an 11-year process from the initial research to the final patent that was in 1938, so that's a long process. The first plastic toothbrush was sold in 1938, and that was actually linked to nylon because the bristles in toothbrushes are often made of nylon, so creation of nylon enabled the production of these nylon plastic toothbrushes. And PET bottles were actually quite late, so 1973 that the first proper plastic bottles were patented. So that you can see that plastic has been around for quite a while. So next thing I want to do is give you a bit of a discussion point. So this would be a really good opportunity to pause the video and actually have a discussion in class if you want to. Is plastic good or bad? See if you can have some arguments for both. What's good about plastic and what's bad about plastic? So pause the video and have a wee discussion in class. Okay, hopefully you've had a nice discussion in class. And the answer is, in terms of good or bad, there isn't a simple answer. So there's a reason why we use plastics. There are actually quite a lot of good things about plastics. And here are just some examples. So they replaced animal products like ivory and turtle shell. So animals like elephants have been pushed to the brink of extinction due to killing them for their ivory. And same with turtles. So rather than using these animal products that were really damaging to animal populations, plastic replaced that. It's really good at keeping products fresh for longer, so our food can last a lot longer in the plastic containers. It's a really important building material for infrastructure such as pipes. It's important in medical treatment and for space exploration. And it lasts a really long time, which makes it very good for things like medical treatment, space exploration, building materials. If we maybe look at some of the not so good things, it lasts a really long time is one of the major problems. So whereas a really long lasting product is excellent for some of the things we want to use it for, once it's finished being used, the fact that it lasts so long is really problematic because we've got to get rid of the rest of the plastic at some point. And tied to the fact that it lasts a really long time, it doesn't biodegrade, so it doesn't break down. It just breaks completely. It just breaks down to smaller and smaller pieces, but doesn't ever go away. So you just get those polymers can break down, but you're still left with those man-made molecules at the end of it. And plastic is made from fossil fuels, and the more fossil fuels we use, the bigger of an impact we have in terms of climate change. And not only is it made from fossil fuels, but often the energy that we use to make plastics, because in order to do that process that I showed you of creating plastic, that needs a lot of energy. So we have to use more fossil fuels to create that energy to then make the plastic. And as I said, the plastic will break down into smaller pieces but won't completely go away. Those small components can have proven toxicity in humans and animals. So particularly the compound bisphenol A, also known as BPA, has been identified as causing toxicity in humans and animals, particularly causing problems with hormones in humans and animals. And that's one we've identified, but there's a lot of micro, which is very small piece of plastic, and nano, which is even tinier little bits of plastic that we can ingest and can move across our intestines and into our bodies. And actually, there's a big gap. We don't really know the long-term consequences of exposure to a lot of these small components once they're broken down. So when we're using them, plastics are brilliant. Once we've finished using them, we have a big problem, and we need to think about how we're disposing of this. So let's have a think about then again, carrying on through this history. So we've decided that some things are good about plastics, and when they were initially invented, they solved a lot of problems. And because of the benefits of plastics, global plastics production has gone up massively. So we can see this graph. This graph starts on the x-axis at the bottom. We can see it starts in 1950 and goes all the way up to 2019, so just 3 years ago. And we can see on the y-axis on the left, the millions of tons that's produced every year in the world. And you can see how massively the number of million tons of plastics that is being produced is going up, and it's continuing to rise. And obviously, again, thinking about the long lasting, all of this plastic, something has to be done with it once it's been finished with being used. So what does happen to this plastic once we've used it? So this graph demonstrates the waste disposal from 1980 on the left all the way to 2015 on the right. And the grey area is plastic that's just thrown away. The kind of pinky, salmony coloured area is plastic that is incinerated or burned. And the green area is the plastic that is recycled. So you can see it's only a very small proportion of plastic that's ever been created that has actually been recycled. Most of it is just discarded. Quite a bit of it is incinerated, which carries its own problems because of the chemicals that are released when plastic is burned. So most of this plastic is not having an end of life that is good for the environment. So that's some statistics from around the world. What about Scotland? What do we find in Scotland? So it keeps Scotland beautiful. We do a lot of litter surveys. We investigate how much litter is being left. And we found that these are the top 10 littered items. And a lot of this litter is purely plastic or has plastic components. So you can see there, number 2 is plastic pieces. We've got number 4 is plastic snack packets, 5 plastic bags, 9 plastic bottles, but also you'll find plastic in period products, in wet wipes, often attached to foil wrappers. Sometimes metal drinks cans have plastic components. So there's plastic running through a lot of things that are being littered. And also what we're finding in surveys that we've done in Scotland is that a lot of our litter is ending up in the sea. So lots of litter is ending up in the sea and damaging marine life. And 80% of the litter that's ending up in our oceans is coming from the land. So it gets blown or gets rushed in the rain into local streams, and they go into rivers, and that goes out to the sea. So we're finding that a lot of the litter that's being dropped, all this plastic, a lot of it is ending up in our oceans. So we've said some of the benefits of plastics, but there's another aspect to this as well. So it's not just that plastics are good, it's also that they've had a pretty good marketing campaign through the years. So this is a cover from 1955 of Life magazine, celebrating the new throwaway living lifestyle. So it's a really incredible material and an integral part of the modern economy. But but this kind of advertising really encouraged people from the 1950s onwards to adopt throwaway lifestyles where lots of things made of plastic were just bought, used once and got rid of. And we quite often think about things like, kind of plastic coated coffee cups and water bottles nowadays, but you can see from this image lots of things we've been encouraged to use that are plastic and just use them once and then throw them away because it's a lot more convenient, cuts down on household chores. Isn't this a great way of doing things? Unfortunately not, if what happens to the plastics at the end is that they just build up in the environment. So we're going to focus on just one type of a very common product that uses a single-use plastic container. So we're going to think about bottled water. We know that many schools are really trying to reduce the amount of single-use water bottles that are being used. But let's have a think about why it is that bottled water has become so popular. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you an excerpt from a video called The Story of Bottled Water. And what we're going to look at is a concept called manufactured demand. So this is thinking about not only why we might use plastic because it's a good choice, but also why advertisers might encourage us to think that it's a better choice than actually a simpler and cheaper alternative. So this excerpt is from, an excellent video called The Story of Bottled Water. The link is also in your resources, and there's some additional questions to answer if you want to take this further. You can also go and watch the full video if you want to. So what I'm just going to do now is play about a 4-minute excerpt from the middle of the video that's the most relevant part to this idea of manufactured demand. But do feel free to go and watch the full video if you're interested. So the story of bottled water.
Bottled water costs about 2,000 times more than tap water. Can you imagine paying 2,000 times the price of anything else? How about a $10,000 sandwich? Yet people in the US buy more than 500 million bottles of water every week. That is enough to circle the globe more than 5 times. How did this come to be? Well, it all goes back to how our materials economy works, and one of its key drivers, which is known as manufactured demand. If companies want to keep growing, they have to keep selling more and more stuff. In the 1970s, giant soft drink companies got worried as they saw their growth projections starting to level off. There's only so much soda a person can drink. Plus, it wouldn't be long before people began realizing soda is not that healthy and turned back to, gasp, drinking tap water. Well, the companies found their next big idea in a silly designer product that most people laughed off as a passing yuppie fad. Water is free, people said back then. What will they sell us next? Air? So how do you get people to buy this fringe product? Simple. You manufacture demand. How do you do that? Well, imagine you're in charge of a bottled water company. Since people aren't lining up to trade their hard-earned money for your unnecessary product, you make them feel scared and insecure if they don't have it. And that's exactly what the bottled water industry did. One of their first marketing tactics was to scare people about tap water with ads like Fiji's Cleveland campaign. When we're done, one top water executive said, tap water will be relegated to showers and washing dishes. Next, you hide the reality of your product behind images of pure fantasy. Have you ever noticed how bottled water tries to seduce us with pictures of mountain streams and pristine nature? But guess where 1/3 of all bottled water in the US actually comes from? The tap. Pepsi's Aquafina and Coke's Dasani are 2 of the many brands that are really filtered tap water. But the pristine nature lie goes much deeper. In a recent full-page ad, Nestle said, bottled water is the most environmentally responsible consumer product in the world. What? They are trashing the environment all along the product's life cycle. Exactly how is that environmentally responsible? The problems start here with extraction and production, where oil is used to make water bottles. Each year, making the plastic water bottles used in the US takes enough oil and energy to fuel 1 million cars. all that energy spent to make the bottle, even more to ship it around the planet, and then we drink it in about 2 minutes? That brings us to the big problem at the other end of the life cycle, disposal. What happens to all these bottles when we're done? 80% end up in landfills, where they will sit for thousands of years, or in incinerators, where they are burned, releasing toxic pollution. The rest gets collected for recycling. I was curious about where the plastic bottles that I put in the recycling bins go. I found out that shiploads were being sent to India, so I went there. I will never forget riding over a hill outside Madras, where I came face to face with a mountain of plastic bottles from California. Now, real recycling would turn these bottles back into bottles. But that wasn't what was happening here. Instead, these bottles were slated to be downcycled, which means turning them into lower quality products that would just be chucked later. The parts that couldn't be downcycled were thrown away there, shipped all the way to India just to be dumped in someone else's backyard. If bottled water companies want to use mountains on their labels, it would be more accurate to show one of these mountains of plastic waste. Scaring us, seducing us, and misleading us. These strategies are all core parts of manufacturing demand.
So I've got a couple of questions for you. Again, I'll go through the questions and you might want to pause and have a discussion about these in class. So these are ones just to have a think about based on that video. So why is bottled water so popular, even though it is expensive and often doesn't taste as good as tap water? Can you think of any other examples of manufactured demand where there isn't really a demand for a product, but a company creates that demand through different techniques? And what can you do to help reduce bottled water use? What could you do as an individual or as a school to try and help reduce bottled water use so we don't end up with a lot of the problems we have with its manufacture and disposal? Okay, hopefully you've had to think about some of those questions. So now we can just, as we're finishing up today, I want you to have a think about what can you do. So I've given you a bit of a history of plastic and identified some of the big problems, some of the pros, but also a lot of the big problems with plastic. So how can we turn those problems into action and actually do something about it? So there are the individual actions that you can do. So you can use a reusable water bottle or a hot drinks mug, so that particularly for water bottles and plastic coated coffee cups and things are not being just used once and thrown away. You get a good quality water bottle and drinks mug that you can use again and again and again. Also try and use other reusable items rather than single use, and that applies whether they're made of plastic or not, because even if they're not made of plastic, they will require energy to create them, and once they've been used, you'll need to do something in order to dispose of them appropriately without damaging the environment. And also use your voice, so ask for reusable items if offered single use. So if you go into a coffee shop and you want to sit down in the coffee shop and you're offered a throwaway item, ask for a proper mug, because if we voice our demand for these reusable items, it's more likely that we'll see change. Now, individual action is good, but it's not about placing the burden of these issues on individuals. It isn't individual people's fault that a lot of these campaigns have happened and have been successful. So actually an even better thing to do would be to organize some group action, because working together is a much better way of creating change and also holding those people accountable who've caused the problems in the first place. So campaign for reusable items and support for them. So for example, water fountains in your school, so that you can bring a reusable water bottle and refill it and you know that you're getting safe water to do so. Campaign for more recycling, campaign to make sure that materials that go into the recycling are actually recycled rather than shipped across to different countries to be disposed of there when they're supposed to be recycled. And also have a think about how you can help reduce litter to reduce plastic pollution and reduce some of that plastic ending up in the seas. And now we often say, here's a good thing that you can do, and it might feel like, oh, that sounds good, but is it going to make a difference? And just to finish up, I want to give you an example of actually it can make a difference. So there's been a lot of publicity, a lot of campaigning and a lot of group work around the issue of single-use plastics and disposal of those and the amount of waste that it's creating. And that has led in Scotland to a law that came into place this year to ban single-use plastics. So that ban means you can't make or supply commercially any of these single-use plastic items. So all of these items are not allowed to be made anymore in Scotland. And that was as a result of group campaigning to make this change. Do be aware that you can see there's a couple of things where it says exemptions apply. So particularly in the case of straws, there's an exemptions apply so that those who need to use plastic straws to support independent lifestyles are able to easily acquire them. So when you're thinking about your campaigns, make sure that you're including everybody. So if you do want to campaign for reusable items, do make sure that the reusable replacements will work for everybody, and if they won't, is there an option for those who require them to still get access to the single-use items, because we don't have reusable items that work for everybody for all things. So do have a think about that if you're thinking of starting a campaign. But this is a fantastic law and a fantastic breakthrough in trying to reduce plastic pollution. So it'd be great if you can think of how you can play your part and campaign for change. So thank you very, very much for attending this lesson today. Do feel free to check out the resources that have been sent to you and also to watch the videos via the links. Thank you very much.